Nobody saw this coming. Only a few days after the world bid farewell to Pope Francis, his sister finally came forward with her voice. Her revelations didn't just raise eyebrows, they left some of the most faithful Catholics in complete disbelief. Long-hidden facts, stirring recollections, and a version of Pope Francis the public had never imagined began to surface. As countless tributes echoed from all parts of the world after the Pope's death, many assumed the full story of his life had already been told. That's when, without warning, Maria Elena Bergoglio decided to step into the light. For the longest time, she chose to remain in the background, avoiding interviews and shielding her thoughts from the world. But after losing her brother, something within her pushed her to open up. Her words weren't just emotional, they were raw, honest, and in certain parts, deeply provocative. This video takes you through everything Maria Elena chose to disclose, starting from her brother's final moments, to the regrets that still linger in her heart, to the unseen chapters of their early life in Argentina, and the immense weight he bore inside Vatican walls. We'll go further, looking at how the Church received her message, how the global audience reacted, and the reason her testimony has triggered so many discussions everywhere. Make sure to watch this video to the end, because the deeper we dig, the more startling the revelations become, especially those that challenge the carefully crafted image the world had of Pope Francis. And by the time Maria Elena delivered the last part of her reflection, you could feel the silence in the air. It was that powerful. For more than 10 years, Maria Elena Bergoglio, Pope Francis's only living sibling, chose silence over the spotlight. While her brother Jorge Mario rose to global recognition as the head of the Catholic Church, Maria Elena stayed rooted in Argentina, living discreetly, giving few interviews, and never leveraging his fame. But everything shifted after the Pope passed away at the age of 88. Something within her changed. She issued a message that came directly from her heart. No Vatican approval, no church edits, just her voice. It wasn't polished or strategic. It was vulnerable, unfiltered, and deeply moving. In her first public appearance since her brother's death, Maria Elena stepped forward and said, "To the world, he was Pope. But to me, he was just Jorge, the boy who chased stray dogs, made me laugh through illness, and wept the night our father left us." She paused momentarily, then delivered a line that silenced the room. "I never wanted him to become Pope. That decision cost us in ways the world can't imagine." That single sentence stirred up a storm. What sacrifices had she meant, and why had she waited until now? In the aftermath of her remarks, both believers and reporters scrambled to uncover more. What secrets had she guarded, and why open up now? Yet her words only scratched the surface. What she unveiled next would make international headlines. This time, it wasn't about doctrine, church leadership, or Vatican affairs. It was about something more intimate. It was about the unseen price of devotion, and a truth that could alter how millions remember Pope Francis. Don't look away now, because what comes next might rewrite everything you believed about his story. Maria Elena wasn't just mourning, she was remembering. With each word, she peeled back the layers of public perception and showed the boy beneath the robes. Before Jorge Mario Bergoglio became the Pope, he was simply a thoughtful child in Buenos Aires. Maria painted a picture of a quiet boy who was deeply protective of those he loved. Even at a young age, she said, he seemed weighed down by something invisible, like he already sensed a higher calling. But few people realized that before the church ever touched him, someone else had already shaped his spirit. Their grandmother Rosa, according to Maria, was a pillar of strength and faith who guided them with unshakable principles. Maria said Rosa lit a fire in Jorge's heart, a fire that burned for empathy, fairness, and redemption. Then, with a quiet strength, Maria revealed something few expected. Their childhood had not been without wounds. She said they both endured a deep, personal suffering, one that Jorge carried quietly into the Vatican halls. Something tore our family apart, an incident that left emotional scars we still carry. It wasn't a crisis of belief, but a betrayal rooted in kinship. According to her, no one suffered more than Jorge. So what was the nature of this betrayal? Maria explained that it revolved around a secret kept hidden for years by their father, a second family, concealed from everyone. She didn't identify anyone outright, but mentioned that Jorge stumbled upon this devastating truth when he was just 12. From that moment, a part of his childhood vanished. He threw himself into a relentless pursuit of morality, maybe hoping to erase the shame tied to those he loved. But the most astonishing claim was yet to come. Maria revealed that this fractured family history was a major factor behind Jorge's choice to enter priesthood. She insisted that Jorge didn't embrace God because of divine inspiration, but to bury his disgrace. That statement jolted both Catholic authorities and devoted followers alike. Suddenly, Pope Francis' image as a symbol of humility seemed more layered than ever. Could it be that his modesty wasn't pure virtue, but a mask for private repentance? What Maria said didn't just challenge who he was, it questioned what he carried in silence. She spoke of the emotional weight Jorge bore, a burden that may have touched every move he made as the Catholic Church's leader. And just as everyone thought the revelations had peaked, Maria hinted at something far more dangerous. A final warning escaped her lips. There are truths the Church never once revealed. So what exactly is this last secret? Stay with us, because we're about to expose the Vatican file Maria claims her brother guarded with his life. This file, she said, had the potential to rewrite church history forever. After her earlier testimony shook believers to their core, Maria agreed to one last conversation, reluctantly. Her voice wasn't cracking from grief, but from a heavy sense of duty. She confessed she had wrestled with the decision to share this next piece for years, since it extended far beyond Jorge himself. She spoke of buried truths locked deep within the highest levels of the Vatican. Secrets Jorge never let see daylight. "You need to grasp this," she said, cautiously choosing her words. "My brother believed some things were too dangerous for the public. It wasn't that these things were wicked," she added, "but that they had the power to shatter deeply held beliefs." According to Maria, Jorge assembled a hidden archive of confidential files, letters, and voice recordings while he served as Archbishop of Buenos Aires and later as the Pope. Inside Vatican walls, this archive was ominously called Il Dossier Nascosto, the hidden file. Not even the men closest to him, she claimed, knew its full depth. And how did Maria know of its existence? She said Jorge gave her a handwritten note and a physical key during his final trip to Argentina. The note explained in cryptic terms that if he ever died and the world began questioning his silence, they should seek truth in the Vatican's shadows. He wrote, "If my voice is ever gone and questions rise, look where even the light refuses to shine." And here's where the story turns bone-chilling. Maria honored his memory for years, never unlocking the safe or reading the letter, until the day he died. What she discovered inside was beyond belief. A personal confession, penned in Jorge's own words. He admitted to uncovering a tangle of corruption so severe it rattled his spiritual core. It involved dirty money, concealed abuse scandals, and covert alliances with brutal regimes. Maria said the letter didn't list specific names, yet the clues inside it pointed clearly to Jorge's inner turmoil, torn between his moral calling and his dread of shattering the Church's image. The chilling part of the story is this. Instead of confronting the truth head-on, Pope Francis reportedly chose to remain silent. Not out of guilt or involvement, she clarified, but because he feared that another global scandal would destroy the Church entirely. He chose a subtle path, a slow, internal attempt at reform rather than dramatic exposure. But Maria claims that in his final years, Jorge came to question that path. There was a growing sense of regret in him, she said, a feeling that only by letting the institution fall could something honest be rebuilt from the ruins. "I think I was too gentle," he confided once. "Maybe I should have been the one to end the deception, not shelter it." And it's here the story takes a darker turn. In the weeks leading up to his passing, Maria says, Jorge made moves to have those secret files released after his death. But before anything could happen, she insists something, or someone, stopped the plan in its tracks. The location where the documents had been kept is now mysteriously empty, and Vatican representatives outright deny the files ever existed. They won't confirm anything, not even the file's presence. But according to Maria, they're lying, and they're scared, because what's inside that file is so damning, so dangerous, that even a dying pope couldn't find the strength to release it. And now the looming question remains. What horror was so great that Jorge backed down in the end? Maria says the answer is even worse than imagined. Not just politics or scandal, but a profound moral failure Jorge believed would be his deepest shame. As the cameras followed the solemn funeral rites of Pope Francis, very few knew the emotional storm that raged in his private room just before his death. In the soft glow of lamplight, Maria Elena said her brother's final moments weren't peaceful reflections, but instead charged with one final mission he had no time left to complete. He was restless, desperate to ensure a painful truth didn't die with him. Maria, holding his hand, urged him gently to let go, to find peace. "You've already done more than anyone should have to," she told him. But Jorge, frail and trembling, gripped her hand and murmured something she never expected. "Don't just tell them about the dossier," he said. "Tell them about the children." Maria was taken aback. The words made no sense at first. "What children?" she asked, confused and alarmed. Barely audible, Jorge replied, "The forgotten ones. The ones we failed. The children who were never even counted." Maria remembers it as the most heartbreaking moment of her life. Here was the Pope, not powerful, not holy, just broken. No longer the world's spiritual leader, he looked simply like a man crushed by guilt. She called it the shattering of his spirit, the final collapse. What he referred to, she later realized, was an unseen legacy of pain. Jorge had tried for years to document what he called quiet tragedies. These were not the stories that made headlines. They were hidden cases of abuse in distant missions, isolated parishes, places so poor or unstable that the church looked the other way. Most of the victims, Maria said, were children from forgotten corners of the world, kids who were never part of any investigation because their cries echoed from places the church never truly reached. In Jorge's mind, they hadn't just been abandoned by the world. Even the very church meant to shield them had turned away. He once confided that there were stacks of documents that had mysteriously vanished from the records. According to Maria, bishops had been instructed to suppress reports. Hush money was exchanged to silence those who dared speak, and rather than face justice, accused priests were quietly transferred. Despite the risks, Jorge made attempts to revisit these dark corners of the past. But every attempt was blocked, not only by Vatican insiders, but also by local dioceses terrified that truth would destroy their image. And perhaps the most painful truth of all? Maria says Jorge turned his blame inward. "I meant to guard the spirit of our faith," he confessed, "but I ended up defending the very machine that corrupted it." To him, the church had become something tragic, a structure so obsessed with survival that it lost sight of mercy, truth, and justice. And then, with barely any strength remaining, Jorge passed Maria a humble wooden rosary. It wasn't expensive, no gold, no jewels, just a piece of worn wood that carried a haunting memory. He said it had once belonged to a young boy in Argentina who sought refuge in the church and was turned away. A week after being rejected, that boy ended his life, and Jorge had carried that rosary for years as a painful reminder. That simple object, Maria says, now holds the weight of her brother's quiet anguish and fuels her decision to speak out. But then the question arises, why has the Vatican remained silent on this promise Jorge made before dying? Maria claims it's because digging into those hidden files would unleash a flood the church couldn't contain. She believes there are those in power trying to preserve Jorge's image, a smiling reformer who gave it his all. Yet in his last breath, Jorge made it clear, the whole truth must be revealed, even if it meant destroying the image built around him. Maria now faces a painful choice. Stay silent like the institution or lift her voice for the sake of her brother's truth. Her next move could shake the very foundations of the Catholic Church. But what she hinted at last may prove the most devastating of all. Maria also reveals what she knows about the man poised to follow Pope Francis and the secret agreement he allegedly made before Jorge's final days. When white smoke rose above the Vatican skyline once more and bells rang through the ancient city, a new age was publicly declared, though the real decisions had already been quietly made in private chambers. Behind closed doors, Pope Francis had long harbored deep concerns about who would come after him, according to his only surviving sister, Maria Elena Bergoglio, not due to theology, but because of a covert pact formed during his lifetime. Maria recounts that the most chilling part came from something Jorge once whispered to her that still echoes in her mind. During what turned out to be one of their final heart-to-heart talks, he looked at her seriously and said, "They already made their choice." He added that he had pledged to remain silent, leaving Maria bewildered and uneasy about who they were and why silence was part of the bargain. That's when Jorge leaned in and told her the name of the man they were backing: Cardinal Matteo Tedesco. Tedesco had quickly become a star in the Roman Curia, admired for his speech, influence, and charm. But Jorge sensed something much darker beneath the surface. As Maria tells it, Jorge stumbled upon letters that revealed Tedesco had privately vowed to key Vatican power brokers that he would suppress any new probes. Specifically, these investigations involved sealed records linked to abuse cases spanning South America, parts of Africa, and Eastern Europe during the 1980s to early 2000s. Francis had pushed hard to uncover the truth in these regions later in his papacy, yet his efforts were repeatedly blocked by powerful insiders. "He warned me," Maria said. "They're not just trying to forget. If Tedesco takes the papal seat, they'll erase every trace." Though it sounded too grim to accept, Maria couldn't shake the conviction Jorge had. Especially after years of scandals the Church had already endured. Why anyone would want to conceal even more truths, particularly now, was hard to understand. But Jorge remained adamant. He believed that beneath the surface, the Church was still split in two, between those pushing for real reform and others clinging to tradition at all costs. To many in the latter group, reopening past traumas was seen not as a path to healing, but a threat to their image and authority. It was only after Jorge's health visibly declined that Maria began noticing troubling changes in his daily life. His once frequent public speeches disappeared, as did his off-the-record chats with reporters, and his calls for accountability faded. Initially, she assumed he was simply growing tired, but soon she realized many of his closest allies had been dismissed or relocated without explanation. In their place came new faces, people with strong ties to Tedesco and little history with Francis's reformist mission. One insider in the Vatican whispered to Maria that there were hushed conversations about a final apostolic letter Jorge had prepared. The letter, which would have demanded complete transparency regarding historical abuse files, was said to be shelved due to mounting internal pressure. Maria believes this letter could have changed the course of the Church, but now it may never reach the world's eyes. What she now suspects, and few dare speak aloud, is that Pope Francis was politically boxed in as his final chapter unfolded. The Church he fought to transform had by the end drifted away from the ideals he spent years defending. And the man now stepping into his place may have been selected not for his holiness, but for the quiet promise he made to keep certain doors shut. Jorge had reached a point where breaking his silence felt necessary, and what's truly astonishing, Maria insists she had been forewarned. She said she got a strange letter from an unnamed sender. Its content was brief, just 3 sharp lines. The message warned, "Mind your words, your brother left with honor, don't let his memory be questioned." But despite that, Maria says staying quiet is no longer an option. Not when she suspects Jorge's final wishes are now buried beneath Vatican bureaucracy and political maneuvering. In her eyes, this isn't about causing a stir anymore. It's about defending a legacy that deserves to be heard. So the real question becomes, will Maria bring those documents into the light? Will she uncover the letters Jorge entrusted to her care? Because as she claims, Jorge gave her more than just heartfelt conversations. He left behind tangible proof. Inside a plain wooden chest hidden in the quiet home of Maria Elena Bergoglio in Buenos Aires may rest the most shocking archive in recent church memory, Pope Francis's own private diary. Maria says the journals cover the final 2 years of Jorge's life, filled with unfiltered thoughts, encrypted cautions, and shadowy references to figures and events never revealed to the public. What makes these writings remarkable isn't only their author, but what he chose to put down on paper, knowing his time might be running out. According to Maria, the journaling began shortly after a severe health scare landed Jorge in the hospital in 2023. She remembers him saying over the phone, They may soon silence my voice, but my hand still writes the truth. The entries, she admits, shook her. One of the earliest ones began ominously. They close in around me. My silence is not peace. It's fear pretending to be loyalty. From then on, the journal unfolds like a quiet war. A journey into Jorge's declining health, but also into growing spiritual defiance. He detailed encounters with senior cardinals who, his notes claim, tried to silence him. They urged him to uphold unity over truth. Justice was to wait. But Jorge wasn't someone who looked away when the innocent suffered. One chilling passage reads, "Shielding the church by denying truth is to nail Christ once again. I've seen victims' eyes, heard their pain, and yet I'm told to smile and say nothing. But I wasn't chosen as Pope to hide the truth. I was chosen to serve God." Maria is adamant her brother never wanted these words locked away. He told her, shortly before his death, to share parts of his journal when she believed it was needed most. But she now fears that moment may never come. Since he passed, she claims to have faced pressure, some subtle, some threatening, from those wanting the journal in their hands. "They warned me," she says, "that it would damage the church, that misinterpretation could cause chaos and pain. But Jorge gave it to me for a reason, and now I see it clearly." Truth often stings before it soothes. And then there's the final entry, the one that sends chills through anyone who reads it. Written 3 days before he died, it's brief, like a farewell, but also a warning. "If this is the last breath I take," it reads, "may it not be wasted. A shepherd should never dread the dark, for wolves scream loudest just before sunrise." Maria hasn't released the journal in full, but a handful of reporters have been granted limited access. One of them, Luca Morelli, an Italian investigative journalist, described what he read as the harshest insider account of Vatican resistance he's ever encountered. According to him, full verification of these writings could ignite not just ecclesiastical debates, but shake the faith of believers around the globe. It gets even more intense from here. According to Maria, there's far more to this than just the journal. Inside the very wooden chest that Pope Francis left behind, there's a sealed envelope labeled, "In case of betrayal." What's inside? Not even Maria knows yet. She explains that she's been warned not to open it until she can be sure it won't be destroyed or taken away. Some believe it might contain audio recordings, private testimonies, or even a list of names tied to the power struggles he alluded to in his journal. With Cardinal Matteo Tedesco, the very man Jorge once feared, now rising to be one of the most influential figures in the post-Francis era, Maria finds herself more torn than ever. Should she risk everything to reveal what her brother left behind, or stay silent, preserving his image of dignity in death? This is where the story takes its most heartbreaking turn. Recently, Maria revealed she's been receiving messages from the families of abuse survivors, begging her to release the journal. They believe Pope Francis may have documented truths that no one else dared to speak. They think he might have named those priests, bishops, or even cardinals who escaped accountability. For them, this journal is not just history. It's a beacon of hope. Now, the question isn't whether Pope Francis was silenced. The true question is, will his words resonate louder than the silence that was imposed upon him?